Well, hello and welcome back to my channel as we continue our march forward in trying to keep track of everything that is happening within the 2020 legislative process. Today is January the 30th, and there was quite a bit once again going on up on the Hill. So let's kind of jump right into it. The main thrust that all of our legislators are still engaged in are the committees dealing with the appropriation of funds. And so, of course, we have the budget from the governor that we went over. We have all of this money that should be spent. But I want to pause just for a moment and rewind just a moment. And what I would like to do is just take a moment to investigate, where is this revenue, also known as taxes, where is it coming from? So in the link below, I've placed a link to the Gardner policy that does go through and gives a fairly good understanding for those of us that may be struggling to understand just exactly what is government thinking and why are they doing this. Well, it boils down to this very simple yet age-old status here in Utah, and that is, conceptually, we have a three-legged stool. And so the three legs are made up, number one, of what they call stability, and that would be our property tax. The second would be the sales tax, which is kind of responsive. And the third, they would term the fairness, which is personal and corporate income tax. What they would like to see happen is that these three legs should all magically be exactly the same, bring in the same revenue, and therefore be balanced. Surprise, surprise. Since we've come out of the recession from 2008 and the economy here in Utah is going really strong, we've maintained the status quo as it relates to the property tax. It continues to grow. The sales tax has actually started to shrink, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the one that has really exploded onto the scene has been personal and corporate income tax. Again, as corporations and individuals are making more, we are being taxed much, much more. So of course that puts this three-legged stool completely out of whack, which makes legislators go crazy. And most of us, it makes us go crazy with our legislators. But really what they're looking at here is this idea that because we have so much coming through with income tax, that's why they tried SB 2001 by shifting tax to other avenues. So even though we were sold as a populace that it was a $300 million savings and $160 million savings annually, again, we really need to stop and look at those numbers, because that may be reflected initially, but by their own accord, they did this specifically to just shuttle money from one to another. A lot of that has to do with here in Utah, we have income tax constitutionally protected to fund education. So continue with that discussion. What they really get excited about here is the idea that these funds may or may not commingle. So for example, we have local revenue that's going to go to public education is the idea. We also have the income tax, which is going to go to education and higher education. Then we have sales tax, which goes into this weird bucket that everybody has known as just the general fund. And that funds the, get this one, general government. And then we also have the gas tax, which goes into a transportation fund. And guess what that funds? Transportation. So as the sales tax continued to decline, it made our legislators kind of freak out, because again, as they're having these appropriation meetings, they want to make sure, where is that money coming? And again, just to review, an appropriation is actually placing a credit on your sheet, and then when the money is spent, that's when that credit is debited. And so that's where if somebody needs $200 million, we're going to appropriate $200 million, and then when they spend it, hopefully it comes back to that 0 point. But anyways, in fairness to what's going on, that's what is happening right now. As I was up there on the Capitol Hill today, I took the opportunity to stop by and look at the social subcommittee, which today was trying to figure out what do we do with Child Protective Services, DCFS, and a host of other social services that the state provides. The biggest debate that was going on was, what about these DCSF caseworkers? On average, a new caseworker only makes $15.88, which compared to those within the area around the state of Utah is a little bit low, and they want to raise that. It was really interesting to me because they said, well, what happens after 2-3 years? Well, these social workers are basically using the job to build their resume, and then guess what they do year 3? They find themselves going out and working for the private sector. So again, it just begs the question, rather than trying to spend more of my money, your money, on these government-funded entities, why do they even exist? And why is it that we cannot be honest enough with ourselves and with our legislators to be able to understand we should be and we must be asking those questions? Is this the proper role of government? And should we be engaged in that process? Now, I'm not saying we immediately just strip everything out and just rip off the Band-Aid. That would throw the economy, it would throw our populace, it would throw our great state into too much turmoil. But what we do need to do is have a solution, just like these legislators are great at saying, we need a solution for this three-legged stool. Well, again, why not have a better solution on how we can reel government back? And why are we continually expanding government simply because we excuse ourselves by saying, oh, but we need these social services. We need this Medicaid service. We need all of these things. Again, because we have them, of course we feel that we need them. Another interesting thing about Medicaid as I was up on the Hill today was how the legislators were asking different representatives about the collection process for Medicaid. And I thought, well, this is a little strange. What's going on here? So we in the state of Utah have 28 employees. And when a person goes on Medicaid and they pass away, upon their death, the state, by law, has to go after funds to recoup the Medicaid expense. And where do they go to get those funds? They'll go after the person's property. So they were talking about the tremendous success of placing liens on people who have used Medicaid, pass away, put a lien on their house, get money from the sale of the house back to government, and off they go. We're talking, ladies and gentlemen, almost $5 million annually that is being taken from Medicaid recipients. So again, the age-old adage, there are no free lunches. As much as we may think that these programs are free, that all of us are paying in, we're broke. And we're also funding ourselves looking at the federal government and saying, well, we'll spend this money because there are federal grants that can get us a 66% return, maybe even better, maybe a little bit less, and we'll use that revenue to offset our expenses. Again, why are we doing this? Very, very strange to me. The other thing I wanted to touch on briefly while I still have you is check out the show notes below. A new video went up on the COBI training, the COBI. Check out that compendium. I think you're going to love it. There's a lot of slick ways to get through it. They have links that take you immediately to the legislative verbiage and language. That way, when we as a populace communicate with the legislator, we can cite the code, we can cite the statute, we can cite the law that we want to have changed and propose meaningful legislation. Not very busy up on the Hill today as far as bills. There were just 3 that went very quickly through the House, and we will touch base tomorrow evening on all of these new developments, where the appropriations stand. Again, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.